Hello and welcome to this episode of How to Be a Great GM. One of the questions that has come through on the website www.greatgamemaster.com is the question of how to handle massive plots and how to handle side quests and side adventures so that it all kind of boils together. And also how to make sure that when you lay down plot A and the party goes, "We're not going anywhere near that. We're heading off to plot Z," which you haven't even come up with yet. How to make sure that it all seems to tie together and that you are truly a master, game master and storyteller. Here's the secret. It's very, very simple, but don't tell the players. If you have a story that you're playing out in your own head, and it carries on regardless of what the players are doing, then it feels as if your world is working on its own and that they're part of some bigger tapestry. Then all you need to do is work out how to thread the random stories that they've managed to come up with into your master story. So we're talking master plotting today, and that's why I've got this map behind me, because it illustrates the idea that in order to run a truly amazing campaign, whether it is set on a continent, whether it is set in space, you need to have your master plot. Now, your master plot is literally the stuff that happens in the background. Now, we've spoken about this before. How to come up with a master plot is how to come up with a main story. But a master plot is bigger than your main story. So let's look at a famous example of a master plot. If we go through to The Lord of the Rings, we have Sauron in his Tower of Evil trying to regain his strength and then launching an assault on all of Middle-earth. That's his master plot. His master plot is assemble an army of orcs, invade Middle-earth, destroy everything, take control. And along the way, he hears about certain artifacts which threaten him, and so he'll dispatch a few lackeys here and there to go and stop them. But the master plot of Lord of the Rings is Sauron trying to take over the world. Everything else is literally player-generated side quests. Did they need to go through the mines of Moria? No, there was a perfectly acceptable passage to the far north. Or the wizard could simply have whistled and called for a bunch of eagles to fly them over. It was players who decided to go through the mines because players went, well, the DM did mention that there was the mines of Moria, or there was Findle's Pass to the north, or there was the Eagles. I think we should go through the mines because there might be treasure down there. As a GM, you're going, I haven't planned the mines because I told you the mines are full of evil horrors and that you shouldn't go that way. I mean, you've decided to go that way. Or because you as a GM, whilst trying to make them go through the pass, discovered that the NPC ice giants that you'd worked out this awesome adventure for were a little bit too tough for the PCs and they turned tail and ran. In other words, Moria is actually the mistake of the GM making the other options too difficult. Either way, you've got your major plot story happening. Sauron is building up his army. So as long as every time you sit down at the gaming table, you refresh yourself as to what your master plot is, whatever the PCs do really won't affect your master plot until it does. Now that's the key. So your master plot, although you've worked out the story, remember it's someone wants something badly and is having difficulty getting it. Sauron wants to take over Middle-earth completely. The difficulty that he's having getting it is he's got to build up these thousands of orcs, and then he realizes that Gondor is actually quite a problem. But then if he attacks Gondor before he attacks anywhere else, the rest of the world, the horse riders of Rohan, etc., will ally against him. So, if he can corrupt somebody, a wizard perhaps who happens to run a certain tower, to launch an assault of his own on the Rohirrim and on the Ents and on the eastern side of Middle-earth, that will distract people from his actual act. Of course, we also learn that the Witch King of Angmar in the far north was also employed by Sauron to create all sorts of troubles up there to keep the dwarves from being involved in the final battle of Middle-earth. And in the south, he was busy corrupting all of the Haradrim so that they would join in his cause as well. So he had all those plots happening. He had all of those stories happening. Did Frodo and Merry and Pippin ever have some kind of influence on the alliance that the Haradrim were busy forging in the south? No, none whatsoever. Merry and Pippin were busy stealing carrots and things from the farmer's field so that they could have a nice breakfast. That was the adventure the PCs wanted to go on. You as a GM have got these world-spanning events that are shaping the very nature of our being, and they're stealing carrots, potatoes, and leeks. So when the PCs then run off on a tangent, they go and explore some random dungeon. As the great GM, what you're going to do is you're going to give them some kind of arbitrary clue. Leave a pendant on a dead soldier, and the pendant has nothing to do with the adventure whatsoever. It might be a hook for the PCs to go and follow. In all likelihood, though, they'll try and sell it. Later on, much later on, when they're now in the south or in the north or wherever, that same pendant can now be seen again on the body of a soldier who attacked a castle or a settlement, or the NPCs that the PCs have been investing in are slaughtered and the pendant of some soldier is left lying behind. To start to build in these amazing threads that later on your players go, my gosh, you've been planning this from the very beginning. It was genius how you got us to go on that side mission. We thought it was a side mission. We thought it was our own mission that we came up with. Because when you saw what we were saying, you didn't look perturbed at the time, but we know that you didn't plan it. But somehow it was linked that when we killed that thing, it caused that thing to happen, it caused that thing. They might not ever see it. The campaign might die beforehand. But because you've got your master plot and you're sitting back and you're going, so Sauron learns that the hobbits are now in Mirkwood. Well, Mirkwood is full of dangerous spiders, and they're those deranged elves. Perhaps that will slow them down. Oh, they've allied themselves with some shapeshifter who's going to get them through those forests, or they've encountered some daft bint in a white dress. All right, I need to send all of my ring wraiths against them instead of just sending one or two at a time. Or I need to really ramp up the search. But it's still minor. They're hundreds of miles away and they're not likely to get here. Besides, one of my allies is currently in that area and can start to work against them. So I'll send out word that the hobbits should be looked for. But I'm not going to actively do anything because I'm more worried about what's happening in the south and in the north. I hope that makes it clear as to just the power that having a master plot, some kind of Earth galaxy spanning initiative can have on your game. I'm not saying that every single game you run needs to have this mega plot, because I have been accused by my players of having these epic stories. And they often question whether I could ever run a very small, intimate game, and I think I've mentioned that before on the channel. I don't want to run small, intimate games. If you want that, go down to Mrs. Miggins' pie shop and play checkers. That's a small, intimate game. My games are epic games, and the only way that I can make them epic is by having these massive plans, these massive plots, and then running them through. One of the advantages that I have, and this is just as an aside note, is that this world here of Braxia, which I've been working on for years, and by working on I really mean testing. I've had so many campaigns running in this place that I know roughly what's happening here in this Sajet Empire. I know what's happening in Drakenmore up here. Ooh, I'm a bad weatherman. Up here to the north. There's going to be some light rain down here in the Brunei King. No. So I know roughly what's happening in these different areas. Now, I've got Bacon Battalion, which you can watch on the other channel, and that's set in this environment. It's set way up to the north off the screen there. Something's happening there. I've got a casual group that I play with on a Friday afternoon or Friday evening, and they're running around in the same world. What they're doing is I'm testing out an idea on running a world invasionary story. It's a cataclysmic story in terms of scope and scale, and I want to see just how well I can do at giving the sense of an impending war and then an absolute war. So that's what they're doing. And then my Patreon players who play with me on a Wednesday evening via Skype, they're also in this world. But they're set in this little town right here of Howden-Lee. And their adventure is taking them in this very small area around Howden-Lee. I don't want them to leave just yet. They can, of course. They're totally free to do so. I won't stop them because I've got a master plot for this space. Does this master plot have anything to do with my regular Bacon Battalion plot or with my Casual Friday plot? No, it doesn't. They're three very distinct plots that will play out and affect one another. And when the Grand Masters of these plots learn of the other plots that are going on, there may be some kind of alliance that's formed, or there may be some kind of antagonism. Either way, you can be absolutely certain that my PCs, wherever they go, whatever they do, will be involved in some way in this tapestry that is the grand plot. And of course, as your PCs go up in level, as they start doing bigger and bigger things, and as they start to unravel this plot more and more and more, well, then for certain we are going to ratchet up the master plot's influence on them. And it doesn't have to be in every adventure. Lots of adventures could have seemingly nothing to do with the master plot, or actually have nothing to do with the master plot. That's not a problem. The master plot will carry on going in its own time. Now, the final thing that I can say to you with regards to your master plot, do not rush it. If you are someone who is playing a one-shot campaign, forget everything I've just said, this video is not for you. If, on the other hand, you are trying to run a campaign that's going to run over months or years or perhaps even decades, that would be amazing. If your campaign is going to run over a long period of time, you need several master plots. Once the master plot that the players are involved in collapses and they defeat the architect of that master plot, there's going to be a power vacuum. And it might be quiet for a while, so the PCs might not have any major plots to get involved in. But this is one realm. Once the arch wizard who's trying to take over the world has been removed, there are extra dimensional creatures who might go, well, the only actual resistance to us has now been removed. Now we can start our invasion of the plane. Or dragons can now come out of hiding because they are now safe, because their only obstacle has now been removed by the PCs. And that starts a master plot that runs off on its own. So that's something that you can do as well. Anyway, I hope this has been useful. I hope it has given you some kind of direction, some kind of idea as to how the master plot should work and how it can run over months or years before it finally plays out to fruition. But most importantly of all is how you can link your master plot, how you can bring that into every little adventure that your PCs run off and do. They don't have to follow script because the script is running itself in the background. All you're doing is tying in little bits and pieces to it. It makes my life a lot easier when I sit down and my players go, no, we were supposed to go to the market today, but instead we're actually going to go fishing because we heard there's a fish out there. Right, I've got an adventure planned for you in my head where fishing becomes part of it, and all you're going to do is once eventually you've sunk to the bottom of the lake, because that's what I want to have happen, you will find the wreck of a ship that contains a missive written by a scout who says that they have noticed strange movements on the far eastern border. But the ship has been purposefully sunk by agents on board the ship, who of course are now undead and will try and stop the PCs from getting to said missive in the box of the courier, of the spy, and etc., etc., etc. And although it's a side quest, the PCs, when they get that missive, realize that yes, it was a side quest of their own design and their own choosing, but I, as the game master, have brought it back to my main story, and later on, that information that they have found will be useful. Until next time, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Of course, you can see that it is still summer here in South Africa, and a very hot one too. And join us on Patreon if you want to join our game that runs on Wednesday evenings. Otherwise, I wish you and your players a very happiest of gaming.